Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. It is a big day because we are diving back into Another Dolphins book club where we are going to meet the Washingtons. If you are just tuning into the book club series, just scroll down your phone a little bit. You'll find one about Jordan Poyer a few days ago that we did. Basically, our goal here is to do a deep dive on these players and how they could have an impact on the 2024 Miami Dolphins. But before we get into that, before I introduce Joshua Houtz, I have to let you all know that we are giving away a free copy of College Football 25 on your system of choice. You get one entry into the giveaway by sending a Dolphins-related question to AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. You get 2 additional entries by including a screenshot of you rating the show on the app of your choice. We'll announce the winner on July 7th, so you'll have more than enough time to get your pre-order goodies and all that fun stuff. I've said a lot. Joshua Houtz, what's going on today, my brother?
Nothing at all, man. I mean, we're in this, this little break that we have, and we get to come in here and talk about the team we love. So I say it every time, man, but it's just nice to come in here and talk Dolphins football. But like you said, this is a podcast that's going to be very near and dear to my heart, not only because of our book club series, but because, let's be honest, these are 2 of those late round receivers that for some reason I just get way too excited about.
Preston Williams, he was undrafted, but we're going to put him in that boat. Malcolm Perry, Lynn Bowden, who was actually a 3rd-round pick, but the Dolphins traded for him from, I think it was the Raiders.
He can still play. Someone needs to sign Lynn Bowden. I'll put together a highlight reel. Like, we should get him on here someday because he does. We'll talk about that off. But yeah, come on. Isaiah Ford was another one.
Isaiah Ford, Marlon Moore.
Way back.
Roberto Wallace. He was always my just let him figure it out guy. Let Roberto Wallace figure it all out, and we'll be good. Am I missing anyone, Josh?
I mean, probably, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of all. I mean, Kirk Merritt was the dude that jumped up on a box that I got way too excited for. Clyde Gates, I have his signed football upstairs. He was supposed to be our Jakeem Grant before Jakeem Grant, which Jakeem Grant never turned into anything. So there's Jakeem a whole Grant list.
On the list.
Yeah, Julian Pruitt was one of them. I mean, we could go on naming obscure receivers that we got a little bit hyped up for, but I guess that just goes to show you how far we come, right? We used to hope that one of those guys could step up and make plays for the Dolphins, and now we got one of the best receiver rooms we've ever seen, and we're sitting here going to try to figure out where these late round guys can fit in because both these guys can play. So, dude. Again, we need to figure out what I should name this little group or club I have because I love these late guys that, are just trying to work their butt off and make the roster.
And the thing is, it really amplifies how hard it is to reach the NFL. Josh, the first note I have here for a 6th-round pick by the Miami Dolphins is that Malik Washington led all of college football with 110 receptions last season. How can we get to a point where you have Tyreek Hill back-to-back seasons with 110 receptions? You have Jalen Waddle leading the league in yards per catch last year. He's still going to get over 70 receptions, even in a down year where he's injured. How on earth is a guy with 110 receptions last year leading college football sliding to the 6th round?
I mean, that's probably what the Dolphins are asking too. I bet there's teams that are going to be wondering the same question. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I guess maybe he just wasn't that he doesn't have that, elite speed, I guess. Doesn't have that elite size, but I mean, he goes out there and just busts his butt off. And as you watch the tape, I kind of joked, he reminds me so much of Jarvis Landry, the way not only he plays in the slot, but, some of that yak stuff and just, you can't really say someone has a dog in him without just picturing that x-ray, but he seems like he has a dog in him. So he went through an array of quarterbacks. I think when you're watching the tape, you can clearly see that the quarterback play got better. I don't know if it was earlier in the season or later in the year, whichever way. But, yeah, man, this guy's a playmaker, fell to the Dolphins in the 6th round. And now, could he be our slot receiver of the future? We'll find out. That's where we're going to talk through this.
So 110 receptions last year with Virginia. Malik Washington, that was his graduate season. Josh, the 4 previous years combined at Northwestern, 120 total receptions. This dude went and just redid the map in reverse, basically. It's like when you beat a video game and you just get to do the whole thing backwards. That's what this dude decided to do. I think that's where you really start wondering, all right, why did he drop to the 6th round? 5'8", 192 pounds. You wonder if there's a situation like, what was it, Josh, 2019, where the Bucks and Dolphins had to play week 1. You wonder if there's a monsoon happening, if someone like Malik Washington could get blown away. That is the general fear, is this dude absolutely cooked opposing cornerbacks at the college level. Everyone's 10 times stronger, faster, grown into their bodies by the time they reach the NFL. And I think that's where the skepticism comes in. And Josh, I think a big part of this and a big part of what made Malik Washington so successful is that they manufactured so many touches for him. They really found a role where he wouldn't really get touched at the line of scrimmage. There wasn't a lot of press coverage. It was a lot of moving before the snap, a lot of not really seeing a guy at the line, the motion the Dolphins did a lot with Tyreek. So it seems like, and I think why I start to get a little excited about this is, hey, this sounds a lot like the type of receiver the Dolphins would want. Like 110 receptions, 1,426 yards, 35 broken tackles, one of 5 finalists for the Pop Warner College Football Award. Dude, I don't care about the Heisman. Give me the Pop Warner College Football Award. That sounds like the A1 of awards for college football. A team captain, 9.17 receptions per game were a single season 9.17 receptions per game were a single season ACC record and was the highest of any player in the FBS. So Josh, bit of a freak last year at Virginia, and I mean that in the nicest way possible.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much free Malik Washington would have been trending, because I mean, it sounds like once he got out of Northwestern, then that's when his career kind of took off. And I mean, it's not only a testament to him to be able to hit the ground running and pick up a new system and go out there and perform, but you mentioned those 35 tackles. I think that led all wide receivers in college football last season. So this guy, I mean, he can do a lot with the ball in his hand. And I mean, just the way he plays the slot position. I mean, you mentioned it, the way they move him around, they don't really let him get touched by the corner. He settles down and finds those openings in the zone. And then, once he gets that ball in his hand, as you can see, when you watch tape, I mean, he breaks tackles. He can do a little bit of everything. I think he has some experience on special teams as well. So, I mean, this is a guy who I see as that long-term fit at slot receiver. Again, I'm getting way too ahead of myself, but we've had the Braxton Berrios, we went through the Trent Sherfields, the Ced Wilsons, the different pieces here and there. Obviously, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to have a huge role in this offense, but long-term, Malik Washington, adding him to that offense, that already has a Tyreek Hill, for now anyway, Jalen Waddle long-term. You got to get a little bit excited. But again, I'm trying to set my expectations. We haven't even seen a preseason. He hasn't even done the Eric Ezukanma thing yet, and where he blows up in preseason, and we're all sitting here getting ready to take him to the Hall of Fame.
His entire last season, in a way, was a coming out party when you consider that he led Virginia in receiving yards in all but 1 week, which was week 1. And the only reason he didn't lead them in receiving yards is because he didn't play that game. He exceeded 100 yards in 10 different games, 9 receiving touchdowns. He had 3 the previous 4 years combined. I think when we look at someone like Malik Washington, it's like, all right, how long can you do this? Do you need to be in an offense that's just throwing the football all over the place? You wonder, how are opposing defenses refusing to cover this guy if he's going to go out there every week and be the leading receiver? And then you had, oh man, I'm going to butcher this name, Anthony Colandrea. He started 7 games. And then Tony Muskett, which you want to talk about college football 25. Tony Muskett is a fantasy football quarterback if I've ever seen one. They split time at quarterback at Virginia, and it didn't matter. Malik Washington was still there being that guy. And when you asked, he had some quotes in it when he first joined the Dolphins, and he was asked, where does this success come from? You're dealing with these 2 different quarterbacks. This entire season was kind of unknown when you consider 3 touchdowns throughout your career at Northwestern. You exceeded you almost surpassed your career reception total in a single season. And he gave a really thought out answer where he really dove into just the importance of being with your players, being in the quarterback room with the quarterbacks, getting to know your guys. And it really felt like that level of chemistry that he was hoping to reach is really what the Dolphins need. When you think about this timing, the fast-paced offense, when Tua's releasing the ball faster than any other quarterback in the NFL, you need to be in your spot when the ball's thrown, or you're going to have guys like Josh and I being, a little goofy saying that Tua's just throwing the ball into a linebacker's gut, when in reality there's something a little more dynamic happening. But Josh, just kind of seeing the way he's played at Virginia, it does feel like, hey, this seems like a Mike McDaniel type guy.
It absolutely does. And I mean, one look around, I mean, you have a quote here that I'll let you touch on, but I know Matt Harmon dropped a pod on our feed. He was absolutely stoked and could not believe the Dolphins ended up getting Malik Washington in the 6th round. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of look back to what we thought Jalen Waddle kind of in that box, that slot receiver's rookie season. I mean, that's kind of where I see that Malik Washington really flourish. I mean, I hate to go back to Jarvis Landry because he's one of one, and he's, that guy that I think we put on a pedestal as that, prolific slot receiver that was always undersized and not the fastest, but just went out there and played his ass off. I think that's what we're going to see out of Malik Washington. But But again, I don't think we should expect much this year, right? I mean, we're going to see a lot more balls going to Odell Beckham Jr., Jonnu Smith, some of those other guys this season. But long term, dynasty, I think you even said it. Are you a homer if you take Malik Washington in dynasty? Absolutely not, man. I mean, you are a homer, but this guy I do think has some talent. And I think a testament of why he fell also has to do with, just how loaded the receivers are, right? I mean, we see receivers now coming out that are ready to go. So that's my little spiel.
So Tyreek Hill is 5'10". And when we were looking at the Miami Dolphins body types this entire offseason, it was like they need that big guy. They need that big slot. Josh, do you feel like, I don't want to say there's a concern, but, these 6th and 7th round picks, the reason I don't see them having a huge impact this year is because think about why the Dolphins drafted Chop Robinson. It was the physical traits. It was the stats at the combine that just were unmatched. He was just an athletic freak. He looked like the Hulk out there. Same with Patrick Paul. With both Malik Washington and even Tahj Washington, they fell because they didn't have that freak body type. Like, they had great college careers, but I'm just a little concerned. Like, you look at what the Miami Dolphins are building here, and you brought in guys, like you said, Jonnu Smith. Odell Beckham Jr. Has a track record of playing outside, but I mean, for a unit that loves to manufacture touches for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I have a hard time seeing Malik Washington being on the field with both of those guys. Maybe you can make it work with either Waddle or Tyreek Hill, but trying to manufacture targets for someone like Washington is going to be a challenge, I think, is the simplest way to put it, when you have those other guys out there, because at 5'8", he's not someone you can line up on the boundary, especially against some of the savvy, older, hell, look in the division. Just look at the Jets, how physical they are at the line of scrimmage. I don't see Malik Washington, especially in year one, being able to line up outside and go against someone like Sauce Gardner. He just doesn't have those physical traits. That's a challenge for Mike McDaniel, but I think he's open to it.
Yeah, he probably is. And another name that we're not really, or at least I touched on a little bit, but Eric Ezukanma. I mean, if this guy can stay healthy, his role is going to be a lot different this year. I mean, we talked about it, but he kind of looked a little bit like Debo last season. So there are just so many mouths to feed. And, maybe they just see Malik Washington as best player that was available, a guy who, like we said, has some of that talent that you see on tape, put up some of those, nice numbers last year. Maybe they think, okay, maybe this dude hasn't even reached his ceiling yet. I mean, we see receivers come in the league every year later in the draft that can stick around. I mean, this isn't as crazy as the quarterback position, right? So there's definitely a chance that Malik Washington, finds a role long-term on the Dolphins, but just as easy as us sitting here talking about that, he could be on the practice squad or cut later this year as well, right?
Malik Washington's 40-yard dash, 4.47 seconds. Pretty damn impressive. And Doug Farr was another guy. You mentioned reception perception, another guy who just ranted about the addition of Washington to McDaniel's offense. He said McDaniel gets to envision Washington doing his thing with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle burning opposing defenses with vertical routes. That's kind of where I think if someone like Malik Washington is going to find a role in this offense, it's going to be that third down option who's going to be completely wide open, where someone like Tyreek Hill's triple covered, Jalen Waddle's double covered. And I don't think you're going to see actually, Josh, let me ask you instead, do you really see a third target developing for the Dolphins, like a consistent one? Do you think Odell Beckham, do you think Jonnu Smith is going to be that guy? Or is it going to be maybe like a case by case, even down to drive by drive, where it's like, we need this specific skill set and Mike McDaniel is going to be able to get him out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be just based on the, what the defense is showing them that week, the matchup, and then just putting the different guys out there. I mean, we saw it, I think it was 2 years ago, Trent Sheriffa, I think, saw him nearly 500 targets. Then we saw him split up between, I think it was Barrios and Wilson last season. Maybe it was Craycraft and Wilson. But this year, I mean, I don't know that I can sit there and say all those, are going to Odell Beckham Jr. And I think with Jonnu Smith's skill set here, that adds a different thing. So I don't know, man. I don't think there's going to be a number 3 that really develops. But to your point, that quote there, if you just take out Malik Washington, which he probably says before the Dolphins signed Odell Beckham Jr., you put Odell Beckham Jr.'s name in there, you put Jonnu Smith's name in there, that reads the exact same, right? When defenses are coming, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, those guys are going to be open underneath. So great question, Jake. Do you think that someone's going to evolve as that third guy, or do you, again, see it being, kind of a group effort?
I think this is the biggest question of Miami's entire offseason, and I think it goes back to what we spoke about with Mark Schlereth about a month ago, and it's Mike McDaniel's pursuit of the perfect play, like kind of seeing what the defense is presenting and finding that perfect play to go against them and beat them, instead of just letting your players go out there. Looking back to last season, Tyreek Hill, 171 targets, Jalen Waddle, 104. Josh, Durham Smythe was number 3 on the Miami Dolphins in targets with 43. Dating back 2 years ago, Mike Gesicki was 3rd with 52, so 9 more than Durham Smythe had last year. And actually, Trent Sherfield was another decent option with 51 targets. So combined Gesicki, Sherfield, that was 100 targets, and it didn't really break out with just 2 players last year. It was a little Achane, it was a little Cedric Wilson, it was a little Durham Smythe. And I think the Dolphins are going to be leaning into that process again. And that's why for someone like Malik Washington, you kind of just want to keep your eye on if a Tyreek Hill, if a Jalen Waddle is dealing with an injury. I'm not saying that these guys can go out and replace them, but man, just looking at Mike McDaniel's ability to manufacture touches for players, only one player is going to get the ball each and every down. And I think that if, you don't have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle out there running all that pre-snap motion every single down for 60 to 70 plays, you might see some opportunities for Malik Washington to get in there and maybe some jet motion across the field, create some big play opportunities where he can take advantage of that frame that allowed him to break 35 tackles. Josh, I think also his 710 yak yards led the entire 2024 draft class. So despite the small frame, I still have such a hard time accepting the fact that you have someone who led the entire all of college football in receiving yards, led all of college football in yak yards. How he goes to the 6th round still seems a little crazy. And I think we should feel really confident knowing that despite his quote unquote limitations, we have one of the offensive geniuses, gurus, who knows exactly how to put them in a way to thrive and survive in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought you were going to say it there, but we also have Wes Welker, right, coaching up this unit. Yep. And then you got Hill and Waddle in there. But you mentioned, when they get banged up, I mean, that's kind of inevitable, right? We saw it last year as the season wears on. You can't have those Ferraris and run them to the ground each week and not expect them to need fine-tuned every now and then. So, I'm intrigued to see what they do with Malik Washington. And you mentioned Achane getting more touches. That was something that I think kind of Mike McDaniel hinted at, this running back room being so loaded that they're trying these players at different positions. So Achane's another guy that, could be, lined up more as a receiver, which you talked about. We hinted at several times. So, man, just imagine being Mike McDaniel, having all these pieces at your disposal and just, sitting here as a mad scientist, just trying to game plan what the 2024 Miami Dolphins are going to look like.
So Malik Washington led college football with 110 receptions last season. Tyreek Hill, 119 receptions. I'm not comparing the two, but hear me out here. So you have that volume guy, that guy who you can trust to be at the right spot whenever needed at a moment's notice. It didn't matter who was at quarterback. Malik Washington did it with 2 different guys out there. So if Washington kind of fits that Tyreek Hill role in the offense, Josh, I got to say, 2024 was Tahj Washington's Jalen Waddle season. This dude led the Pac-12 with 18 yards per catch last year.
Yeah, we do got to mention that Caleb Williams throwing in the rock, right? Because everyone loves Caleb Williams. But it's funny. I sat here and said that Malik Washington didn't have that elite speed. I think I said 4.47. I looked it up quick, and Tahj Washington's 4.52. And I don't know why when you're watching a tape. I don't know if it's that slender frame. I don't know if it's because he has that race car driver helmet on. I don't know what it is, but he just looks faster to me on tape. So that was definitely interesting. But yeah, man, Tahj Washington is a guy I'm going to get a little too overhyped about. Interested to see where he's integrated into this offense if he makes the roster. But you mentioned that Jalen Waddle season. It did seem like that was him last year with those yards per catch. I mean, it was insane.
Turbo Tahj Man is what they called him. 1,062 receiving yards. The first time he exceeded 1,000 receiving yards. You mentioned he was catching passes from Heisman winner Caleb Williams, 8 total touchdowns. I think it's just interesting to say this out loud, that the Dolphins got 2,488 yards and 17 touchdowns with 2 picks in the 6th and 7th round. It really goes to show the type of receiver that the NFL is looking for, right? We had the first 15 players of the draft were all offense. We saw the big physical, the quote unquote wide receiver ones going, while you have the Dolphins really focusing in, we got to get more speed. We need more speed. Josh, he became the first Trojan drafted by the Dolphins since Austin Jackson back in 2020, and an all Pac-12 honorable mention last season. I thought it was pretty interesting because with Malik Washington, it was like, all right, this dude was an absolute stud. Like, where can we start to see the warts outside of his frame? Like, there's a certain point where you just got to accept that someone can ball, right? At some point, if he's going to go out there and produce time and time again, you get it. So Tahj Washington going in the 7th round makes a little more sense because I did some research and he wasn't that consistent option for the Trojans throughout the year. He lost his starting job at a couple different times, but this dude is an absolute, go back to it. He is an absolute dog, a fighter, a scrapper. At 5'10", he's never really been the biggest guy on the field, only 175 pounds. I don't know, Josh, is that too small to be a missile in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think, traditionally we could sit here and say that, but if there's anything Mike McDaniel taught us, even with Devon Achane, everyone's like, oh, he's too small to do this and that. I mean, he put up, 800 yards that tiny frame. So I don't know if it's too small, but you mentioned him having the dog in him. I think that's what really made me excited when watching the tape is he's finishing blocks. Just this little scrappy guy, like Scrappy Dog, right? I think that was Scooby-Doo, right? Little Scrappy.
Yep.
Scrappy Doo was his name, I think. Okay. So yeah, he's just out there finishing plays, getting in bigger guys' faces, blocking, doing that little bit. And then as a deep threat, he was just blowing the top off defenses. And I think what I liked the most was the fact that the way he could locate that ball in the air. I mean, he made some tough catches. And again, it's just a guy that you're rooting for because I don't know what it is. You said Turbo Tahj. I mean, that's a great nickname for him, man.
I stole that. I think they were actually calling him that last season, but I'm not entirely sure, but I'm definitely going to stick with Turbo Tahj. Josh, this was the guy I was like, all right, it's so fun to do these shows and it's so fun to get hyped up about these guys, but I had the Uncle Jesse moment where I got down on a knee and I was telling little Michelle, I'm like, we only have 53 roster spots. We cannot keep them all. And then I was, getting through a tough moment. And then Michelle said back to me, she goes, Uncle Jesse, did you know that Tahj Washington recorded a tackle in the Pac-12 championship game against Utah? Do you know that he has 5 career special team tackles and he has 3 kickoff returns for 75 yards? That's a 25-yard average in a league that does everything in its power to get rid of kickoffs? That all of a sudden, Josh, created a new path for me, especially when we're considering a new kickoff is coming to the NFL, one that's been used in the XFL for the last few years. Tahj Washington, it's one thing to say they play special teams, but to see them out there as a tackler, to see Tahj Washington have quotes where he was out there as a gunner, he was out there as a returner, any type of special teams play, he was willing to get on the field to the point where the coaching staff even said to him, it's like, all right, dude, we get it. You're great out there, but we need you to cool down. You're Caleb's favorite target. We need you to be a receiver, not just a special teams guy. While that might have been true in college, man, I think that special teams history is going to be as key to success in making this Dolphins roster.
Absolutely. I mean, and I thought for sure you were going to say Michelle said something about, you got it, dude. Isn't that what she always said? Or how wooed, something. But yeah, man, I mean, that's what's going to end up making some of these guys get on the roster, right? The fact that they can go out there and they do the gritty work and things like that. I mean, a lot of us loved Mac Hollins for a similar reason, right? He was that guy that was on special teams, starting to make plays as a receiver. I mean, we don't necessarily need Tahj Washington to be a receiver right now, right? Long-term, build him up if you have to, getting him out there as a gunner. But you mentioned keeping him around. We learned on that preview pod, I think we did our version 1.0. We dropped the 53-man roster down. When I kept Tahj Washington, all hell broke loose, and I was in no man's land. So the Dolphins have some definitely tough decisions to make. But for me, again, Malik Washington, I think, is the favorite, obviously, to make the roster. I think he's the more well-rounded player. But something about Tahj Washington, I don't know. It's just I get way too excited about him.
Speaking of being way too excited, let me share this quote of Mike McDaniel talking about special teams and the new kickoff rule. But the framework of the play is an area of innovation I think we'll see early. I think we will see it throughout the entire year. I can see somebody with the new rule and the amount of space that can be created by the non-negotiable element of not moving until the ball is caught. Those things make it pretty impactful play where it could be at the 21-yard line or at the 40-yard line like that. Snaps fingers. So in that, I can see there will be cool things looking forward all the way to the Super Bowl next year. You have 2 weeks to prepare for an opponent. You can comb more league-wide tape, and there will be a play in that game, in that phase, that I think will probably be a big influence in the overall outcome. Josh, McDaniel seems very open-minded. I think he went on to say that he believes that by week 4, week 5, something like that, you're going to have number 1 receivers, number 1 running backs in the NFL raising their hand saying, hey, give me a chance to return those kicks. So how did the Dolphins deal with a situation like that? Like, you have Jalen Waddle, you have Tyreek Hill, 2 guys who, I mean, hell, it sounds like they'll be awesome at this. But, Josh, we go back to that Preston Williams fear a couple years ago. He returns 1 kick and all of a sudden derails everything that you liked about a player, and they're fighting for their life after that.
Yeah, and let's just say I love Preston Williams. I was making jokes. I think he was projected or something before the injury to maybe put up more yards as a rookie than Jerry Rice or something. Someone might have tweeted that. Crazy people out there. But I think what you're going to see is a lot of these guys, maybe let the game dictate who's out there, right? I mean, I don't know about you, Jake, but I remember I live up here in Pennsylvania. I remember Deshaun Jackson, man, get some returns, absolutely, finishing games that way, right? He's back there in a key critical moment. Obviously, nowadays they might punt the ball away from him or this and that, kick the ball away. I guess you're not doing that now with the new kickoff rules. So yeah, it'll be intriguing to see who's back there. But I think what was most funny is you're sitting there saying about how Mike McDaniel's talking about innovation and different things, trying to figure out, and then Danny Crossman comes right out and he's like, yeah, I think we're just gonna stick with a kicker. Like he's talking about how all these other teams are using like safeties. I think Justin Reed has say different teams are like thinking outside the box. And he's like, yeah, I really see a benefit from just using a regular kicker. And it's like, of course you do, Danny Crossman. Of course you do.
How can you have Danny Crossman and Mike McDaniel like that close to each other, where we have the last 2 years this entire debate about how Mike McDaniel wants these innovative, forward-thinking type guys? Like Danny Crossman's, it's an act, right? It's got to be. He's been in the NFL. He's been a special teams coordinator for about a decade now. He was one before he got to Miami with the Buffalo Bills. Got here when Brian Flores was here. Josh, this has to be somewhat of an act if he's lasted the entire Mike McDaniel tenure, and he's just kind of giving us that surface level of Jason Sanders, good.
Yeah, I mean, you want to think that, but at the same time, I mean, we can't sit here necessarily to say what a special teams coach was or is, but I know when he first came to Miami, everyone's like, "Oh, this is one of the best special teams coaches in the league," right? I mean, and now you're just seeing it, and you're like, "Okay, I'm kind of over this." So when you have innovation on offense like a Mike McDaniel, you hear Anthony Weaver talking about all the outside the box things he's bringing in here to just come out and hear Danny Crossman, even just lie, like make it sound like you're thinking up some like Frankenstein type stuff in your little dungeon or whatever. But yeah, man, I don't know.
Josh, one final note here. Washington began his career at Memphis. He transferred to USC, and there was a little drama behind it. A report came out that Washington initially played for Mike Norvell at Memphis, but things soured when the coach left and Ryan Silverfield took over at the program in March of 2021. The Daily Memphian reported that Silverfield called Washington selfish, which led to the receiver entering the transfer portal. Seemed to work out pretty well for him if you're going to have over 1,000 receiving yards playing at USC with Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I think that was so long ago that I don't really put too much stock in that. I mean, same thing with Malik Washington. We're sitting there saying free Malik Washington. Some of these guys, transferred way back when there wasn't this nil stuff, and now people are getting paid to go to better schools. He just seemed like he wanted out, and for them to call him selfish and then him to go elsewhere and prove that, he not necessarily, at least based on the tape, based on everything you heard out of USC, no one that there was calling him selfish, right? So I think it's all watered into the bridge.
Before we wrap up here, Josh, something I wanted to talk about is, what will that third option be for the Miami Dolphins offense? We touched about it throughout this pod, but I think we can safely say after talking Tahj Washington, talking Malik Washington, weirdly, this was like an Eric Ezukama campaign because the Dolphins have one skill set and they have a lot of it. Small body, fast receiver. I have a hard time, man. I have a very, very hard time seeing Malik Washington at 5'8", Tahj Washington at 5'10", both of these guys on the field together for the Miami Dolphins. And I think that's safe to be expected as 6th and 7th round picks when you have Tyreek Hill, when you have Jalen Waddle. But at the same time, man, it's so hard to contain the excitement where you could imagine these gadget guys being on the field, maybe at the same time where one's in the backfield, one's in motion in the slot. That's where I could see them really finding their comfort. And man, this could be the second coming of like an Albert Wilson, Jakeem Grant duo. I mean, Jakeem Grant was 5'6", so we're already a little taller than that.
Yeah, we're already further along. Maybe they'll be high-fiving down the road in the Super Bowl in 2030. I mean, I don't know how far down the road we're looking here. But you mentioned Eric Ezukama. I mean, we kind of forget that he's 6'2", 206 pounds. So he is a little bit of a bigger body. They've already showed that they want to use him in that gadget type way. I'll be intrigued to see who comes out of that third option. I continue to think it's going to be Jonnu Smith, but Odell Beckham Jr. is that big name, right? The last thing I want to say is we love to do these comps. I looked at Player Profiler. They didn't even have one for Tahj Washington, so that's a little bit disrespectful. But they had Zay Flowers for Malik Washington, so I don't think anybody's gonna be upset with Zay Flowers if he turns into that. But we'll temper our expectations. I mean, I won't, but everyone else should.
So Ryan Smith, Pro Football Focus, wrote an interesting story about the Miami Dolphins offense recently. He shared that since Mike McDaniel became the head coach, the Dolphins have utilized shift motion on 84% of their offensive snaps, the highest rate in the league, well above 55%. And Josh, you got to consider that 84% of snaps using motion, that's a lot of running for Tyreek Hill before he gets 1,800 receiving yards. And that, to me, is where you look at last year. Nothing is I don't know if jarring is the word, but it's shocking to me when you see that the third most targeted player on the Miami Dolphins last year was Durham Smythe, and it was only 43 times. Considering how much Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle have to move around, I think the Dolphins could really find something special here using Malik Washington, Tahj Washington to step in, maybe be that guy in motion where you could take advantage of that, third linebacker, that third cornerback on the field. That's where I see the opportunity coming in. We love Jonnu Smith for his ability to attack space. That's exactly what these two guys have here. But man, I feel like I'm talking to the wrong person about this because you're going to tell me, hell yeah, a 6th or 7th round pick can come in and gain the trust that easily. But have we learned anything from the Preston Williams, the Malcolm Perrys, or anything like that?
I have not. I have not learned anything. I'm still going to sit here and get way too hyped up because, we're fans, and that's what makes it so exciting. But when you look at how loaded this wide receiver room is, when we sit here and look at how loaded the roster is and all the different tough decisions the Dolphins are going to have to make, it's going to be hard to keep 7 wide receivers as we've seen. But I didn't really utilize the PUP list either when we did that. So we'll see what happens. Dolphins have different ways to go about it. And again, what I think is most intriguing, we compared him to an Albert Wilson, Jakeem Grant, some of those other guys that we all once wished that, could step up. These guys don't have to do it right away. We don't need Malik Washington to be go out there and have all these touches this year. We don't need Tahj Washington to really be that. We just need them to learn and develop behind the scenes and perhaps be that special teams guy, like you said. I mean, if you can get Tahj Washington out there on special teams as that gunner and he doesn't ever want to come off the field, and that's what he does, throughout these next few years, I mean, that's still a win for a 7th round pick.
Looking at the roster battles, man, just seeing the speed these guys have, and River Craycraft last year, 9 receptions on 12 targets, 2 big plays and a touchdown. Just considering the motion and how much Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are forced to run, we saw it last year. It looked awkward at times with Cedric Wilson. When we look back 2 years ago, I think the issue with someone like Mike Gesicki, never had the best hands. Volume was never really his thing, where there are going to be some issues, but you just saw just those slight differences in timing that just made it just simply not work. I think that these additions of Malik Washington and Tahj Washington, maybe not 8-9 receptions a game, but in terms of just these quick jabs, instead of sending it out to River Craycraft or Braxton Berrios, I could see an argument made for Malik Washington carving out his role there, where the Dolphins they do, but they have an interesting dynamic at receiver with all the pre-snap motion. You have guys getting tired. So Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, these guys aren't seeing the field as much as you'd think. They're not on the field every single play. And I think Malik and Tahj can replicate some of that speed, some of that threat a lot more than we've seen from Braxton Berrios, someone like Cedric Wilson, who was signed before Tyreek Hill was part of the picture. So this is kind of that next evolution in the Mike McDaniel offense, where we're hoping that, week 17, week 18, that these guys have the speed to be that wide receiver who happens to be maybe all alone in the end zone. We saw Cedric Wilson make a couple big plays late in the season. We're hoping a few more of those can be manufactured just by having a Tahj Washington speed, Malik Washington speed, which is just going to be such a difference maker and such a huge value, and props to Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel for just targeting this one trait in those late rounds, understanding how much that one trait does for this offense.
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking while you're mentioning is, I mean, we're sitting here talking about Tua Tagovailoa getting a long-term deal. We're talking about how we have to sign Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips eventually. The list goes on and on. You're going to want these cheap rookie wide receivers on these deals. I mean, a 6th and a 7th round pick, like if you hit on a Malik Washington, I mean, at some point, the contracts might, you and the player might have reached a different agreement, but you got a 6th round pick, a 7th round pick, making basically peanuts if they can find a role in this roster. I mean, those are the way these teams, when they have that $50 million quarterback, $30+ million receivers, those are the things you have to hopefully hit on. And, we have not seen the Dolphins hit on an Eric Ezukama based on injury. Cam Smith, we're still waiting on those things. So who knows, man? I'm intrigued. And, Mike McDaniel's excited. I think he did his little fist pump after this, or maybe that was Jalen Wright. I can't remember.
Tahj Washington caught 54 of 74 targets last season. So this absolutely isn't, Devontae Parker needing 128 targets to catch 72 balls. But you do see that little bit of the inconsistencies there, where you do wonder how much you can trust these guys year one, especially if they get into a situation where a cornerback can get their hands on them. I mean, Josh, wasn't it the kiss of death, the fact that the Dolphins had to throw an out route to Chase Claypool and he couldn't do it? Like that was the reason they lost that. Let me take that back. There was a bunch of reasons they lost that Bills game, but that was one thing that stuck out, just the inability to run that one route. So I don't really see these guys being the volume guys, but I do see them being that, oh no, all of a sudden, you have cornerbacks turning their heads and there's this guy wide open behind them. I see them being that type of special, at least in year one.
I just wanted to make the jokes. The Bills saw enough out of that play that there's talks that he's like their best receiver at camp now. So Chase Claypool, man, that's another one, right? He's one of those guys we hyped up.
Life comes at you so fast. People forget.
Yeah, now he's our enemy. Damn you.
Before we wrap up here, Josh, one final thing. We mentioned at the top. Let's settle this right now. What are we going to do for a nickname? Would you like to watch? You were a Washington Monuments guy?
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought of it. I think mine was Malik, don't call me Tahj Washington, and the other one was Tahj, don't call me. I think that's what I first said.
Those are so good. I like those.
What about Taj Kambal, like Taj Mahal? I just thought about that while we were doing this.
Oh, Tahj
touchdown
Kambal.
Taj. Turbo Taj is better. I like the Washington Monuments though. Was that you that came up with that? Because, I haven't really seen some good ones.
That one I think was the one from Twitter.
Okay, Meet the Washingtons. I thought this was like a Pixar movie or something, so I could definitely have seen that too.
I was going to call this pod Meet the Washingtons, but the Google SEO would have just kind of shamed me for that one. So the issue is we need them both to make the roster for one of these nicknames to work. So a couple I have here, we have the Washington Monuments. Personally, I like Washington Squared. I thought that one was kind of funny, pun on Washington Square. And then if we really wanted to just be real stupid and have some fun with it, let's call them the Washington Commanders.
Let's do it. Washington Commander, Washington. Yeah, I don't really have anything good.
Should we call them the Washington football team?
We could. Do we even know what they're called? Do we know what they call themselves anymore? Are they still the Commanders or are they changing that? I can't remember.
They're the Commanders, but there is a rumor that they're going to be changing again, which would be too funny. Commanders was an awful choice, but once you make your bed, dude, you got to sleep in it. You can't be flipping this much. It's just
no. But their unis are kind of cool. I mean, Daniels looks pretty sick with that visor on in that uni.
I totally agree with you. Joshua, do you have any final thoughts here before we wrap up here? This is our second book club in the books. We started with Jordan Poyer. We are now doing the Washingtons. If you have any suggestions on players, positions you want us to talk about, send us an email at AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com. We will be back later this week with another show, thinking a mailbag. We might have Cat. We're not entirely sure yet, but it's the off season, so we're kind of allowed to be not sure just yet.
Yeah, we really don't know. For those who play Madden, I think the cover reveals tomorrow, and I believe, or I guess this will come out on Tuesday. So today, I believe there's a cover reel. Maybe we'll see Tyreek Hill in the cover. I don't know. It sounds like Joe Burrow's voice, but that'll give us something to talk about a little bit. But enjoy this and throw us any questions you want. Always reach out to us on Twitter, X. Make sure you follow Jake at JMENDEL94. But as we always say, thank you so much for listening to this, because without you, there is no Jake Mendel and there is no Josh Houtz.
Hold the didn't I see you tweet something that it was CMC's voice?
Yeah, well, someone said CMC. I originally thought it was no, I did think it was CMC. Someone said CMC, but now everyone's seeing Joe Burrow because I think GameStop dropped I think they must have sent out the cover by accident on their site. Either way, it didn't sound like Tyreek Hill, but they could just be doing that. Like if you were smart, like, CMC here, we'll pay you this much money or whoever to, do the EA Sports in the game, and then we'll just throw some other dude on the cover.
I think I'd prefer both Tyreek or CMC over Burrow. Like Burrow, he had the playoff run, sure, but like I'd like something a little more relevant. You know what I mean?
I was embracing the Tyreek Hill because you mentioned it. Dolphins use all that different motion. They're kind of revolutionizing things. And let's be honest, man, we haven't won anything. We have this curse that the key still lingering. So maybe the Madden curse would be that thing that finally broke it. But I don't think we're gonna get it this year, man. And Tyreek Hill would absolutely love to be on the cover.
All right, that is it. That is all the time we have. Thank you all so much for joining us. Go enjoy this beautiful week, this beautiful weather. We will talk to you soon, but until then, fins up.
Fins up.